Okay, hello and welcome to our week 6 Zoom room, our final Zoom room. Let me see if I can add a little something here. We have a few things to go over this week. I'll try not to keep you too long, but we do have a little bit to cover. That's a little bit better angle. In terms of industrial and organizational psychology and a couple of very important components of that organizational psychologists and sometimes called corporate psychologists are called on to help. One of them is managing change, and you're going to get a chance to do an interesting exercise this week looking for sacred cows, and you'll find out more about what that term means as you get into your lessons. I'm not going to go too much into it here now, other than just kind of mention it because you're going to see that in your lessons. So managing change is not easy. People are typically resistant to change, some more than others. There are certain personalities that actually do enjoy change and actually thrive on change and are always looking for ways to make change happen. That's inherent to their personality, so they're okay with it. Others typically don't like it. And there are some personalities that are very resistant to change. They like traditions. They like doing things the way they've always done it. If things are working fine, why would we look to change anything? So the way you approach change in an organization is key, the way you approach it. All right, so let's just talk about a couple of things here now. Okay, the sacred cow, I'll just, you're going to learn more about it as you go through your slides here. And the reading as well. It's essentially something that has been going on in an organization, a practice or a procedure, or kind of the way we've always done things for so long that nobody wants to touch it. It's kind of like, the sacred cows in India, no one can touch them. That's where the term comes from. It's not meant to be derogatory, I don't think. Hopefully no one will take offense to that term. But there are a lot of things that happen in organizations. You're going to see a great video that explains one example of that. And you're going to get a chance to go on a sacred cow hunt in your organization or maybe your church, whatever the case may be. Now, there are stages to change. It's not easy. And I think it's important to recognize and realize and remember that change takes place in stages. I always use this example of on a broader scope from a political and government scope. Today we wouldn't dream of assigning anyone specific seats on public transportation, on public buses. That's just unheard of nowadays. No one would think to do that. Most no one, I guess. But there was a time when it was very common, especially in the South, and maybe only specifically in the South, where minorities, disenfranchised groups, were not allowed to sit in the front of the bus. They had to go to the back of the bus. That was actually a law. And if the bus was crowded and there were all the seats were taken, and someone, not a minority, a white person, if you will, got on the bus, a person who is a person of color, a black person, a minority, would have to surrender his or her seat to the white person. Now, that's just unheard of today, and it probably should have always been unheard of. But think about the stages of change, because that's something that I think we are aware of. So Rosa Parks, she refused to give up her seat to a white person, and she got arrested for it. And it caused a boycott of the busing company, if you will, or public transportation. And eventually that led to change. So first comes the policy. And even though people don't agree with the policy, or in this case, the law, they reluctantly and little by little start adhering to it. Then after they're getting used to that, then now that becomes the norm. So now we're now in future generations, in essence. So that's the change. That was a change that people fought hard to not accept on the one side, and people fought hard on the other side to say, hey, let's make this whole thing fair. Without getting into the political ramifications too much, there's enough of that going on these days. But I'm just looking at that just in terms of how change sometimes has to take place. And that's how resistant people are to change. And interesting enough, like after that becomes now the norm, people would want to change it to any other way. So, the employee stages, I think, are important. First, they deny, they defend the old way. Sometimes they will be passive aggressive about it and try to undermine it. That's why it's important that when you go into change, that people understand the reason for the change. Again, right here, what's the reason behind this change? Why are we changing things here? Is it just because? That doesn't help people accept change. But if they can understand the reason for it and see how it's going to be more efficient running the organization, they will more readily accept it. Having said that, typically they even resist it. They will say, I don't see how that's going to be more efficient, or I don't think it's going to be more efficient, or it might be more efficient in this area, but it's going to cost us efficiency over in this area. So, there's almost always inevitably resistance to change. And who's making the change? Getting buy-in, and the way you frame the change. I use this example oftentimes. When you're approaching someone who likes tradition, this is a person whose personality is such that, we looked at personalities in the past couple of weeks. Someone who's always neat, their desk is always clear and clean, their office is put away just so it has a nice, organization to it. They're always on time for meetings. They keep a schedule. They keep a calendar. They tend to get, say, annoyed when other people don't keep a calendar or don't show up for meetings on time. These people are going to be more resistant to change because they like tradition. It's just inherent to them. It's neither good nor bad. It's just how they are. So if you bust in their office and say, we've got a great change coming up, immediately they're going to say, whoa, wait a second. What do you mean we have a great change coming up? Things are going fine. What's the matter with the way things are going now? And then you're embedded in a discussion of why and what and where and all these kinds of things. Not that it's going to be ever easy to explain this to those who like tradition. But if you come in and say, we have been looking at our efficiency, because they like efficiency, and our productivity, and we think it might be time to start a new tradition. Okay, they like traditions. They hear the word tradition. So you haven't said you're going to let go of anything, although you are. You're going to start a new tradition. Now, they don't typically like things that are new, but that's a little bit easier to swallow than, can you believe this great change that's coming up? Or we're no longer going to use the old-fashioned time clock for our front-level employees. It's a little bit different way to frame it, and that's important. That's important for you to know, and that's important for you if you ever do some consulting within your organization, or if you go out on your own and become a consultant, if that's in the cards for you down the road. So it's very important to have an understanding of, again, not only yourself and how you adapt to change, but those around you, whether you are their boss or whether they're your boss, and how you, especially if you present an idea to your supervisor, knowing his or her personality might help you make a better presentation as to how you're going to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization. This is what I'm talking about with this one right here. Then implementing the change, regardless of how it looks on paper, it typically, the change that is, it typically doesn't go that smoothly once you try to implement it. It's much like a battle plan in the military. You draw up a great battle plan of how you're going to go across the river and get to the top of this mountain. Unfortunately, when the plan is put into place on the ground, there are people who have other ideas, i.e., in this case, the enemy, the elements and things such as that. Just to draw an analogy to the organization, there's going to be other things that you didn't factor in, no matter how much you try and factor in everything. There's going to be some things that you probably didn't count on, and that's people who are very good change agents there is, as you go through change in procedures, whatever that may be, and I'm being very general here, I hope you're catching on, whether we're going to change whatever procedure that it is, and you say, okay, we're going to have a problem with the traffic flow going to the work area, so we got to have to move some shelves around or make a new traffic pattern for whatever the case may be. Whatever those tangible changes may need, that may need to take place in order for this change to be implemented. I'll get it together. So those who are really good change agents also have kind of a block or a column, if you will, in the plan for what we don't know. And you go through and you try and exhaust everything you can possibly think of that you haven't already thought of, and you still leave that there because it's a good idea to come back early on, the first day that the change is implemented, and then a week later, or 3 days later, then a week later, and in that column, things that we didn't anticipate, or things that we didn't count on, or unforeseen factors that we could not have known about, and then how to deal with those. That's a big part of implementing the change. You need to recognize that you're going to put this change in. Don't think it's just going to go smooth because it looks good on paper. It's a good idea to have people who are against the change as part of the meetings once it's just determined to go forward with the change. They're not there to sabotage or prevent the change from happening, but you want to hear from those people and their ideas. Listen, Bob, listen, Jill, we're going forward with this. I know it's not something that you want to have happen, but we want you in part of this meeting. We want you to be part of this plan to help us implement this change. And we want to know what your ideas are, because you're against this, and we want to hear why you're against it as we go along. We're going forward, but you're going to help us. So we're on the same team here, but you're going to help us understand what we might be up against that maybe we didn't see, and you're so adamant against it. So there's that. Okay, good. Changing the culture is, I'm not going to really go into that too much. We'll get into it a little bit more when we look at the sacred cow, and we'll touch on it a little bit and some of the other things. That is just it's a big deal. Whatever change it is, whether changing culture or changing procedures, the change, I just touched on some of it, but changing the culture of an organization is a huge undertaking. You've got to have key people on board. There's going to be some of those people out there who are extremely resistant to change. There's going to be people who, in a big enough organization, that are absolutely resistant, that are going to sabotage it, that are going to be passive aggressive. So you really have to be very clear on what your goal actually is. You've got to embrace those negative people too, for lack of a better term, call them negative, or embrace those negative ideas because you want them to come with you. And that's kind of, we're seeing some of that in our government now with the polarization of the parties, whatever side you're on. There's a few people out there from both sides who are saying, listen, I got my ideas, you got your ideas. Please accept mine are valid for what I want to do, and I'll accept yours are valid. Let's assume good intent, because we're taking this journey together. Where there's too many people out there now, not just in politics, government, and there's also business as well. If you look around, who want to discard those who don't agree with them and don't want them to come along. We need everybody. So at a much smaller scale, maybe easier to do in an organization. Okay, guys, this is where we're going. I hope you can agree with it. And I hope you see the value in it. And typically those, I want to get there too. I just think this is the better way. Well, we're kind of going to go this way. We're going to keep your ideas in mind, and we will make adjustments as we go. We want to hear from you along the way. You're a very important part of this team and this organization. And I'm glad that we both agree that we want to get to this ultimate goal, whatever that might be. Maybe it's less turnover. Maybe it's larger profit margin, or maybe it's just more sales, more volume, whatever that is. So we agree that we want to do that, and we agree that we want to have a culture that is where we embrace diversity. We want to have a culture where people are happy to come to work. We want to have a culture where people don't get overworked. Those kind of cultural things, organizational cultural things. So there will be some who say, you know what, I just want to come here and do my job. I don't care about anybody. And this doesn't jive for me. I want to go a different way. This culture is not going to work for me. In that case, we'll miss you. We're going to help you. And I don't mean that in a negative or mean way, but if this isn't where you want to be, you're not going to be happy here. Now, obviously you're going to make us unhappy, but the point is you're not going to be happy. Let us help you see the light here. Or if you want to go somewhere else, we'll help you build up your resume, build up your skills, or whatever the case is. Find that organization that, I'm not saying they're looking for a negative culture, but there are cultures who, are just strictly get the job done, get home, whatever the case may be. Cultures who really, embrace collegiality and fellowship and things like that. That's different. Okay. So we could use churches for an example. There are those who really say, we really need to follow biblical law, or we really need to just reach out and love and accept everybody. Not that they're mutually exclusive. They're not. In fact, they are, they both fit and both biblical. But you've no doubt been to different churches. You can feel the different sort of organizational cultures of those churches. So, for example, some really want to build their youth program. Some really just want people their age, maybe 40 and up, because, or 45 and up, or even elderly. Sometimes they don't, it's, they go visit the grandkids, but they want to go to church and worship with people their own age. They don't want to be bothered with younger families. And, that's okay if that's where they want to go to church. So that's a good example, I think, probably better than an organizational example that I gave you. But yes, sometimes it's like, okay, it's okay if you go, and put that out there, and it may be best for everybody. So anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about as far as change. It's a huge, huge deal. And one last thing I will mention, a great book that if you haven't already read, I highly recommend it. You can read it in about an hour. It's called Who Moved My Cheese. It's an absolutely classic business book. It's not written like a textbook in any stretch of the imagination. It's actually written like a fable, or like almost like a children's story. Nevertheless, it's enjoyable for adults to read. I've read it 100 times and more. I've listened to it on my player in my car, countless times. And it talks about change and how people deal with change, how we all deal with change. And I highly recommend it if you're interested in organizational change, if you haven't already read it. Oops, let me back up here. Yeah, this next part is about stress, and we all have to contend with stress. Let me just back up here. And stress management. Everyone has some kind of stress in their life. The only people who don't have any stress are people who are dead. And that's kind of a joke, but we all deal with some kind of stress. Some of us have more stress in our lives. Some of us have less stress in our lives. The key is, how do you manage that stress? How you see some people who you just see, my gosh, how do you even do it? You got issues at work and people complaining. You got some things going on with your family that are causing some stress, and they somehow don't let it get to them. And then there are people who have just a tiny bit of stress in their life. I mean, here they are, and they're maybe happily married and young and everything like that. And one little thing happens, and they get stuck in traffic one day, and they just start honking their horn and yelling, and leaning out the window and yelling and flashing their lights, whatever. And they just don't manage stress that well. How you manage stress, and everyone has a different inherent skill set, but you can learn how to manage stress better, and you can teach others, and you can help manage the stress in your organization. There's a great exercise I do hope you take part in. We're not going to do it today. This just defines stress and what a stressor is. And then there's the two kinds of stress, which you should know. Most people don't. There's eustress and there's distress. Both are stress. Both harm the body, believe it or not. Any kind of stress wears on your body, kind of like if you think any kind of traveling wears on your car engine, right? Like anytime you start it and go, there's wear and tear on that engine, just a little sometimes a lot. But eustress should be like you have eustress like when you're getting ready to get married. Like, you're really excited. You finally got the mate of your dreams, and you both love each other. Nevertheless, you're getting married. It's a big change in your life. It's happiness, right? And you turn that into positive energy. and you're liking it and you don't want to live without it, but it's stress, all right? And we know that, right? And then there's distress. Distress is, uh-oh, my car broke down and I'm on the way to work, and what am I going to do now? And that's distress. Stress, obviously not what you want to happen, not what you planned on. So those are the two different kinds of stress. There's a lot more in the literature about those two kinds of stress, way beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about. Okay. Again, I mentioned some people manage stress well, some people just don't. Know where the stress comes from. Comes from fear. And as Christians, we know that God told us many, many times not to have anxiety and not to have fear. That is, heard it many, many times, the most talked about or the most given advice in the Bible is fear not. Fear not. So that's one of the things. So no need to fear. And resentment is another one. And that's something we have to just let go of, right? We resent a lot of things. We hold on to that resentment. Resentment means holding on to something. People wrong us. I hate to tell you, but if you don't already know, and I know you do, people are going to do you wrong in this life. And here's the thing we don't want to think about and talk about. We're going to do other people wrong. We are at some point. Hopefully not as often as others, perhaps. But the stress, hanging on to that and saying he shouldn't have done that to me. He took credit for that report I wrote. He got the promotion I should have gotten. I shouldn't have got my pay cut. All those things. That resentment brings on stress. The only thing you can do is let it go. And it's easy to say let it go, but if you're hanging on to it, you need some kind of help oftentimes, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're weak. Holding on to it and not getting help, that kind of means you're weak. We can find a lot of ways, a lot of places to find help. Professional counseling through human resources, right? And I'm not talking about Sigmund Freud kind of counseling. I'm talking about behavioral counseling, life coaching, and certainly through our pastor, through our fellow believers, as well as just reading the Bible. And probably reading the Bible should go with all of those things. Reading the Bible, Proverbs and Psalms, does a great deal to relieve many people's stress, mine included. So even your humble professor has stress. So those are some of the sources. So be aware. If you're feeling stressed, that's where it might be coming from. Here, I'm just not going to go through everything here. This would be another big one. But other sources of stress, occupational stressors. And then getting into sort of the more professional industrial and organizational psychology role. Organizations are good organizations, and people in management who understand how things work realize that their employees being stressed is not good for the organization and impacts productivity. And they will oftentimes hire you to come in and teach employees how to deal with stress so that they can be more productive. All right. So, let's see. I think I will. I was going to go with, You know what I am? I'm going to go with, for our secret word so that you get credit if you decide to watch this recording, because no one's here. I'm going to go with the book Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. That's going to be the secret code, if you will, for you to be able to get your points. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you go for our final one. But I'll just finish by saying it's been my pleasure. You are a wonderful group of students. You've done very well throughout. And it's been my pleasure to be your professor and your teacher, facilitator throughout these past 6 weeks. I know that you're going to do well. I'm looking at several of you hoping that you'll at least consider going to graduate school. You are that material. In fact, any one of you in this class could. Some are probably closer to that sort of grad student than others are. But anyone here can just brush up on their writing a little bit and what have you, and move into that next level, which is a big jump, but an important jump and a good jump, especially if you're looking at a degree in psychology. So anyway, hopefully you'll at least consider that. And it's been my pleasure. I'm humbled and honored to do this. I've been with CCC. It'll be 3 years, I think, in January, 3 or 4. And anyway, I'm just pleased and happy that I've had this opportunity to serve in this capacity. So all my best to you and your families. I know that they're taking this journey with you. So let's all keep each other in prayer, and we will see you in the course room this week.